The concept of leadership in professional sports is often romanticized. We are conditioned to believe that head coaches act as unifying figures, impartial architects who distribute credit and accountability based strictly on merit and production. But the reality of a professional locker room is far more complex, and often far more toxic. When the cameras pan away from the hardwood and the doors to the locker room swing shut, the true hierarchy of an organization is revealed not by what a coach says, but by what they deliberately choose to omit. Welcome back to WNBA Action. Today, we are undertaking a deep psychological and tactical examination of the post-game dynamics within the Indiana Fever organization. We are pulling back the curtain on a recent overtime victory against the Chicago Sky to expose a deeply disturbing pattern of behavior from head coach Stephanie White, a pattern of blatant disrespect, tactical sabotage, and a systemic refusal to acknowledge the generational brilliance of Caitlyn Clark. To properly frame the magnitude of this organizational dysfunction, we must first establish the context of the basketball game that preceded it. The Indiana Fever hosted the Chicago Sky, a team currently languishing at the bottom of the league standings, essentially operating in a rebuilding or tanking phase. This was a game that the Indiana Fever dominated early, building a massive, commanding 19-point lead on their home floor. In any competent professional ecosystem, a 19-point advantage against a lottery-bound opponent is a closed case. You execute your half-court offense, you rely on your primary ball handlers to manage the clock, and you walk away with a comfortable victory. Instead, the Indiana Fever subjected their fan base to an absolute masterclass in late-game incompetence. They completely squandered the 19-point lead, entirely abandoned their defensive principles, and were dragged into a grueling overtime period. They ultimately survived the collapse, but the victory was a product of sheer individual brilliance rather than cohesive coaching. Yet, when Stephanie White addressed her exhausted roster in the post-game locker room, she did not demand accountability for the historic collapse. She attempted to spin a catastrophic failure into a narrative of collective growth. Listen to the opening remarks of her locker room speech, and pay close attention to the hollow, corporate platitudes she uses to mask a near disaster.
Crazy, man.
Good job. Okay, really good job. We weathered the storms. Okay, we came together. Y'all, I heard you more in huddles and in timeouts than I've heard you all year long. That matters. That matters, right? The collective positivity, the collective accountability, talking each other up, that is huge, y'all. Yes, we are closing that thing. We are closing that fist right here. But I'm so proud of the way that you came together, the way that you...
We grew today. That is the phrase utilized by the head coach of a professional franchise after blowing a massive home lead to a bottom-tier opponent. This is the danger of toxic positivity in high-stakes athletics. When a coach refuses to address the fundamental flaws in execution, the stagnant offense, the blown defensive rotations, the inability to close out a struggling opponent, they establish a culture of mediocrity. But the philosophical failure of the speech is immediately overshadowed by a glaring, almost incomprehensible omission. In this overtime victory, Caitlyn Clark delivered a statistical masterpiece. She recorded a 30-point double-double, orchestrating the offense, manipulating the pick and roll, and pulling down 7 crucial rebounds. She single-handedly kept the offensive engine running while the defensive structure collapsed around her. Yet, as Stephanie White went around the room distributing individual praise, highlighting specific statistical milestones, the name of her franchise point guard was weaponized through complete silence. Watch the continuation of the locker room address and observe how the head coach deliberately bypasses the architect of the victory.
What are you talking about?
AB career high 34 points.
Okay, watch this. She said AB career high 34 points. Now tell me what she said about Caitlyn Clark.
Coming together and finishing this game. Yes. All right, great job. That we grew today. Yep. We grew today. I'm proud of you guys. AB career high 34 points.
It is a stunning display of psychological manipulation. Let us be entirely clear. Aaliyah Boston absolutely deserved the praise. A 34-point performance is a phenomenal achievement and a testament to her undeniable dominance in the paint. But leadership is not a zero-sum game. Praising your starting center does not require you to actively ignore your starting point guard. When a player records 30 points and 10 assists in a must-win overtime game, ignoring that contribution in front of the entire roster is not an oversight. It is a calculated decision. By refusing to acknowledge Caitlyn Clark's heroics, Stephanie White is attempting to diminish her authority within the locker room. She is sending a clear, unspoken message to the veterans. The coaching staff will not elevate the rookie, regardless of how historically significant her numbers become. It is a manifestation of an ego-driven power struggle, where a head coach feels threatened by the overwhelming gravitational pull of her own superstar. If this behavior were isolated to the privacy of the locker room, it would be deeply concerning. However, Stephanie White carried this exact same narrative strategy out to the post-game press conference. When a head coach steps to the podium, they act as the official spokesperson for the franchise. They shape the media narrative for the following 48 hours. And when White was given the opportunity to contextualize the two-man game between Boston and Clark that saved the team from humiliation, she somehow found a way to shoehorn Kelsey Mitchell into the conversation, offering unearned praise for a performance that nearly cost them the game. Listen to this bizarre deflection at the podium.
I think I said this when C was drafted here. It's like when you have the bookends, when you have a point guard, and you have a center that are special. You can build a team around that, and certainly then you add in Kelsey, who had already been here, and she had a quiet 19, right?
A quiet 19. The sheer audacity required to sit at a microphone and praise Kelsey Mitchell's performance as a stabilizing force in this specific game is staggering. Kelsey Mitchell finished the game shooting 7 of 17 from the floor. But the box score does not capture the tactical damage she inflicted in the final minutes of regulation. With the Indiana Fever clinging to a 5-point lead and only a minute remaining on the clock, the fundamental rules of basketball dictate that you exhaust the shot clock. You protect the basketball, you run your offensive sets, and you force the opponent to foul. Instead, Kelsey Mitchell succumbed to the exact same tunnel vision that has plagued her entire career. Driven by an apparent obsession with reaching the 20-point threshold, she ignored the clock, ignored her open teammates, and forced a highly contested, low-percentage isolation layup. She missed. The Chicago Sky immediately transitioned the missed shot into a score, cutting the lead to a single possession and completely shifting the momentum. That is not a quiet 19. That is a player prioritizing individual statistics over the structural integrity of the team. And yet the head coach chooses to highlight her at the podium while remaining completely silent about Caitlyn Clark in the locker room. The psychological warfare being waged by the coaching staff eventually manifested into a catastrophic tactical breakdown on the court. To understand why Caitlyn Clark is rapidly losing faith in this organization, we have to analyze the final inbound play of the game. The Fever were holding on to a precarious lead. The objective was simple: inbound the basketball to your best free throw shooter, force the intentional foul, and ice the game at the charity stripe. Caitlyn Clark was shooting a flawless 11 for 11 from the free throw line in this game. She is the most lethal closer in the sport. The defense knows it, the fans know it, and her teammates know it. The Fever set a screen. Clark popped wide open, creating a massive throwing window. But the inbound pass did not go to the generational point guard. In a moment of absolute coaching absurdity, the play was designed to force the ball to Kelsey Mitchell. Let us break down the exact mechanics of this failure.
As it's supposed to be, the Caitlyn Clark, Aaliyah Boston two-man pick and roll show, non-stop, unstoppable. What are you talking about, Kelsey Mitchell? She forces a layup with a minute left, didn't even need to shoot it, could have pulled the ball out, ran some clock. Then the ball goes off her leg. I don't know why you guys are forcing it to Kelsey Mitchell. Caitlyn Clark is 11 of 11 from the free throw line. All you had to do was inbound the ball to Caitlyn Clark. She was open. She makes the free throws. Game is over. Game is over.
It is a failure of logic. It is a failure of situational awareness. You have an 11 for 11 free throw shooter standing completely unguarded, ready to accept the basketball and secure the victory. Instead, the coaching staff attempts to get cute. They attempt to run a misdirection play to feed a veteran guard who had already demonstrated incredibly poor decision-making down the stretch. The pass is forced. Mitchell mishandles the pressure and the ball bounces out of bounds. This specific turnover is not just a mistake. It is a breach of trust. When a head coach draws up a play that actively avoids utilizing the most reliable weapon on the floor in a critical moment, They are telling their superstar that they do not trust them to finish the job. The immediate aftermath of this turnover provided the most revealing visual of the entire season. During the subsequent timeout, as Stephanie White attempted to justify the broken play design, the camera caught Caitlyn Clark's reaction. It was not a look of anger. It was a look of profound, exhausting disillusionment. Watch the interaction on the sideline as the reality of the coaching incompetence sets in.
Some more points. Look at Caitlyn Clark.
Bro, Caitlyn Clark is wide open right here. She's coming wide open. Y'all just ran this inbound play. Throw the ball into Caitlyn Clark, but you want to force it to Kelsey Mitchell, and look what happened.
Her hands up with the Caitlyn Clark. And then Stephanie White has to explain herself after she almost cost them the game. Watch this. Instead, trying to get cute and get Kelsey Mitchell some more points. Look at Caitlyn Clark. Her hands up.
Look at her eyes. That is the look of a basketball savant realizing that the person holding the clipboard simply does not understand the geometry or the strategy of the game at an elite level. Caitlyn Clark knew the original play. She knew the original red was guaranteed to result in 2 free throws. She checked into the game under the assumption that the coaching staff wanted to win. To have that assumption shattered by a senseless, ego-driven play call that targeted the wrong player is enough to break the spirit of any athlete. The Indiana Fever organization is currently walking a highly dangerous tightrope. They possess the most significant cultural and athletic phenomenon in the history of women's basketball. Caitlyn Clark is single-handedly elevating the financial structure, the viewership metrics, and the global relevance of the entire league. She is producing statistical anomalies on the court, recording 30-point double-doubles while carrying a roster that routinely struggles to execute basic defensive rotations. Yet, instead of embracing this generational gift, the coaching staff appears entirely consumed by an internal power struggle. Stephanie White is actively choosing to protect the egos of veteran players at the direct expense of her franchise cornerstone. When you refuse to acknowledge a historic performance in the locker room, when you artificially inflate the contributions of players who actively harm your late-game execution, and when you draw up critical inbound plays that deliberately avoid your best shooter, you are committing organizational malpractice. A franchise cannot survive when the head coach is engaged in a silent war against the point guard. Basketball requires synergy. It requires absolute trust between the person calling the plays and the person executing them. The visual of Caitlyn Clark throwing her hands up in disbelief during a late-game timeout is a warning siren for the Indiana Fever front office. You can only freeze out a superstar for so long before they realize that their ambition, their talent, and their understanding of the game have completely outgrown the environment they are trapped in. The victory against the Chicago Sky will go down in the record books as a win, but the tape tells a completely different story. It tells the story of a team deeply divided, led by a coach who refuses to surrender the spotlight to the player who actually deserves it. If the Indiana Fever expect to transform this roster into a legitimate championship contender, they must purge this toxic dynamic. They must establish a hierarchy based on objective reality, not veteran tenure or coaching insecurities. Until that happens, Caitlyn Clark will continue to fight a grueling battle on 2 distinct fronts: the opponents on the hardwood and the profound incompetence radiating from her own sideline. This is WNBA Action. We refuse to accept the sanitized narratives offered at press conferences. We study the tape, we read the body language, and we expose the underlying truths of professional basketball. If you appreciate uncompromising, highly analytical breakdowns of the mechanics and psychology of the WNBA, ensure you hit the subscribe button right now. Turn on your notifications so you never miss a deep dive. Head down to the comments and let me know your thoughts. Is Stephanie White deliberately trying to diminish Caitlyn Clark's authority? And how long can this toxic locker room dynamic survive before the front office is forced to make a drastic change? I will see you in the next breakdown.